Okay, good afternoon. We've got a few people joining us. I can see everyone jumping into the room. Welcome, welcome. I can see that Donna's joined. Welcome, Paula, William, Aman, Alicia. This is fantastic. Everyone's on time. I want to thank you for tuning in. I just want you to throw into the chat box whether you can hear me loud and clear. Make sure that our sound quality is coming in okay. Welcome, Ange. I can see Andrew Uglo. Andrew, lovely to see you here. Welcome. I'm just having a look down the list here. Who else do I know? A few familiar faces. Welcome, Lee. Welcome, Kylie. And I can see Louise. Welcome. Paula, Philippe, lots of people. So quickly throw in the chat box. Caroline, my trusty co-pilot for the session today, is going to be managing the chat box because I can only do one thing at once, just to make sure that you can hear us loud and clear. And if you've ever been to one of our webinars before, let us know that you're coming back for more. We love to have people come back and see us again. And we're so pleased to see you all here. And I firmly believe that you attending this is going to put you ahead of your competitors. Welcome, Kathy. I can see Kylie and Lee. Welcome, Morgan, Mark, Nadine, Nancy, lots of people. Fantastic. There's loads and loads joining. It's interesting, you know, just as a few more people are allowed to join, I think everyone got over webinars and we stopped doing them. And this is our first one for ages, but I actually think, you know, people are now back in the office and they're seeing some of the radical changes that have come about from COVID. And that's why we wanted to share this with you, because we've been making a lot of predictions about what we thought was going to happen. And we want to share with you what we're actually seeing happen. So in the interest of time, we might get started and I'll leave you in Caroline's very capable hands to manage the chat box. So let's do some quick introductions. Up first, welcome everyone. My name is Natasha Hawker, for those of you who don't know me, and I run a business called Employee Matters. We're an employee relations company. We specialize in helping small to medium businesses create exceptional business performance through their people. Think employee relations, policies, recruitment, and terminations. We're great at helping business owners and managers who have limited time, money, and patience hire the best people and exit their non-performers. We are thrilled today to be partnering with our very good friends from ELMO. We've got Robert Watson and Ganesh here today. We do a lot of work with ELMO. We really love their products, and we thought that one of their very newly released product called COVID Secure was really important to what we're talking about today, because we're going to be covering off that very hot topic of vaccine management. A warning up front, if you haven't seen me present before, you'll get a sense of it already. This is going to be a hugely fast-paced session. I want to get as much value out to you guys through this session that I can. But I know where the real value of these sessions come. They come in the question time. So hang about for the questions, but put your questions in the chat box as we go. We normally get inundated with questions and we're very much managing them on a first come, first serve basis. So please do make sure you get them in the system. Now, to encourage you, and I can see even more people have joined us. So welcome everyone who missed out on my welcome at the beginning. You are most welcome here. In order to encourage you to lean in, get involved in this podcast, we're giving away 2 books of From Hire to Fire and Everything in Between. The first prize winner will be judged by Robert. That is for the person who had the best question, probably the trickiest one for me to answer. And the next prize is for the person who's been the most interactive on the chat channel. Remember, you're going to learn from other people on this webinar, so make sure you're listening to each other and interacting with each other along the way. So let's get into it and start talking about the new COVID world of work. Okay, the first but very boring but very necessary part of the presentation is that everything that I'm giving you today is general in nature. It is about HR. I am not an employment lawyer, nor do I or my company pretend to be. Now we've got that bit over. There is no legal advice in here, and I would encourage you to take this and then potentially get further advice. Often in these sessions, we are going to raise more questions than we answer, but that's what the purpose of this is. It's around raising awareness and building education. And we are in, to use the very overused term, unprecedented times. We're having to learn as we go. So let's kick off here, it is my very firm belief that your employees are your greatest asset. They're also potentially your greatest liability and should be treated as such. What we do is build employee assets for our clients. If you take nothing else from this presentation, your employees are going to be more important to you in the next 12, 18 months, 2 years than they potentially have ever been before. And what I do know is that successful business people know they can't do it on their own. They know what they're good at. They stay in their swim lane and they outsource, and they get the right HR processes and support and technology in place to enable them to grow their businesses without the pain points. So I'd love you to pop in the chat box for Caroline if you agree with that. And you don't have to, because everyone's coming at this session from a different perspective. So throw into the chat box who thinks their employees are key to their success and great assets for them. And while you do that, we will move on because we've got so much to cover today. So 2020 and the events that took place in 2020 are going to have really huge repercussions for businesses. And I want Caroline to pop into the chat box. I don't know whether any of you guys are fans of Sammy J. And he did this fabulous I suppose you'd call it a parody of 2020 is back. 2020 has dragged on into 2021, and we're still going to feel the repercussions of that in 22. So I've got Caroline popping that in the chat box to you so you can have a giggle at that and lighten the mood potentially. So back in March 2020, we conducted some research because we wanted to understand what COVID was going to mean for employees, what COVID was going to mean for businesses. And I said way back then, I said, everything COVID has employee implications. And I think that that's what we've seen throughout this. So what we did was we conducted that research, and then we've sort of now got some inkling on what some of those challenges are going to be. The number one for me, and I think because there's a lot of uncertainty and we are going to cover off vaccine management, is vaccine management, major implications for businesses. And then again, it depends on what state you're in. If you're in Victoria, it's even tougher for you than other states. Implications to business and how work is done. We're going to cover this off. It is never going back to the way it used to go. So how are we going to do that, and how are we going to manage that, and how are we going to manage our employees on an ongoing basis? Unemployment rates and recruitment. Recruitment has gone nuts in the last 2 weeks. And the other thing that I would warn everyone about here is, if you haven't heard about it, look it up. The Great Resignation era is coming. We are seriously worried for a number of our clients who are going to lose a whole lot of people in quick succession. I'm going to talk more about that in some more detail in a minute. Population movement. We don't have to be in a capital city anymore to do our jobs. Then we've got border closures. I used to travel to Brisbane, Gold Coast, or Melbourne 3 weeks out of 4. Now, what's going to happen when business travel is able to come back? Are people going to be happy to travel? Do we still value face-to-face? I've booked a client lunch for one of our favorite clients down at Sales on the 18th of November. It's going to be fun to actually learn how to socialize again when we've been doing it over these screens. I used to have clients say, do you charge, can we get a discount because you're doing it over Zoom? Zoom is a hell of a lot harder, I can tell, to present to people than working a room. So, there's all those nuances that are happening. And the last one here, and I think this is a massive one, we now need to think about managing our employees as individuals. We used to manage them as a collective, and that has been a big change. So, what questions do people have? I think Australians are really worried still from a professional and a personal perspective about what the future looks like. There is a lot of changes coming here. I mean, you think about it, even from our working from home policy. What was our working from home policy pre-COVID? Has it been adjusted to allow for the new COVID world of work? Physical contact. Is everyone going to be happy to come back to the office? And I can tell you, no, they're probably not. We're already getting pushback from some of our clients where they're saying, employees are saying, no, I don't want to come back. Social activities. Do we socialize in the same way? I saw friends shake hands the other day. That was quite novel. I hadn't seen anyone shake hands for about 18 months. Is that going to be how we do business? Normally, when we meet a client for the first time, that's how we do things. Work-life balance. This is a big one. The feedback says that people have more flexibility working from home, but what we're seeing is their hours of work have extended because the computer is there and open all day, or it's on the kitchen bench, or it's on the dining room table. A lot more employees are extending their work hours. That has ramifications because you may have triggered an overtime payment, which you were unaware you were triggering for your employer. And that might mean we've got some underpayment issues coming through there. And I think the last one here is honest dialogue. And if I could give you any advice, we're going to have a lot more conversations and a lot more honest conversations with our employees, because statistically, 48% of employees don't trust their employer. And so, you know, as we're navigating great change, that communication strategy, that communication piece is going to be absolutely key. And that comes back to that piece I just mentioned before around the Great Resignation era. So let's talk a little bit more about that. It is absolutely key to me that employees are valuing their employee happiness in a way that they never have before. Some recent research from Microsoft said that more than 40% of employees are considering leaving their employers in the next 12 months or in this 12 months. Now, people say, well, why would that be the case? And I had somebody with a client that I was chatting to yesterday, and he said, I got a resignation from my senior guy. He's not unhappy. It's not because I've done anything wrong. He just wants to change. So in the past, we used to go and sit on a beach in Bali for 2 weeks, and we came back and we were refreshed and we were ready to do another 12, 18 months or so, 4 or 5 months doing our work and then go and have a rest again. We can't do that anymore. The only thing people can do at the moment is change jobs. So that's what I think is driving some of that. The other thing is that people are rethinking their goals in a way that they never have before. What makes me happy? Am I happy? Am I doing a job that I really want to do? Or do I want to do something different? The other interesting thing here was that many Australians want a complete career change. And last of all, I found this statistic fascinating. 12% of Australians were considering jobs in essential services, and this was dated early mid last year. But what they found was army applications skyrocketed by 42% during the COVID pandemic, because guaranteed income, the government is still going to pay your salary. And so people wanted that stability. So here's what I would take about the Great Recession. If you're not doing stay interviews now, stay interviews are talking to Ganesh and saying, Ganesh, what's going to make you stay with me for another 12 months? What do you love about working at ELMO? What would you change if you had your magic wand in front of me? You know, so think about that, because he might tell you something that is actually quite an easy thing to do, and that might keep him in the organization for longer. So really encourage stay interviews. Retention strategy, make sure you've got a retention strategy. If you've got some key people in your business, make sure you know how to protect them. Make sure think about what you're going to need to do, not just to keep them here this year, but the year after and the year after that. And then as a result of that people movement, we've got wage pressure. We haven't had wage pressure in Australia for years. It's been zero wage growth for many years. So that is starting to happen too. So the next one is population decentralisation. I love this one. 10 years ago, I started Employee Matters in our bedroom. I don't recommend that, but many businesses have been started in bedrooms and garages. But what we've always done is we were, I suppose, ahead of the curve, because our team have always worked from home or the client side. And so I've always been a massive advocate for working from home. But I can tell you, even early indications are that we will never go back to the way it was pre-COVID. We will go back at best to a hybrid world of work. And this will become the new norm. But what I'm worried about, and I mentioned it earlier when Robert and I were talking in the green room, is I think we did a fabulous job of moving to working from home overnight. Literally, we had a client in Melbourne that literally picked up their consoles and took them home because their people didn't have laptops. So we did that really well. What we haven't been smart about is upskilling our management team to manage a team through a pandemic, but manage a team that work remotely. So your team might be much more dispersed. You might have some in the office all the time, some in the office some of the time, and some never returning, and some working from home. So how do we still collaborate And how do we manage somebody who we don't think is performing well when we're not seeing them on a day-to-day basis? And what we're seeing from early research is that people aren't having those difficult conversations anymore because they don't know how to have them when they're not seeing the person and they're not entirely sure that the performance drop is really there. So I think that's really important. The other thing is, though, there is a huge upside here. Talent pooling. You now don't have to hire in your capital city. You can take skills from all over Australia, potentially all over the world. And I think we need to be careful that if we force people to stay near the home office or the head office, we may potentially lose people. An example being, I play squash at 6 o'clock in the morning. I am a bit nuts with a bunch of guys. And one of them was telling me, Sydney based, he'd had a record year. He'd had his best year ever in COVID. And his wife got a job opportunity up in Brisbane. He sold his house here on the Northern Beaches, made a nice little tidy packet, and he's going to live in Brisbane. And he first told his employers and they weren't really happy about it. And he's managed to negotiate the fact that he is going to still do his job from Brisbane. It happens to be in 1,000 kilometers away, but he wasn't in the office last year anyway and still had a record year. And I would argue, had they not had that flexibility, they would have potentially lost him. So I think that is a real thing that we need to keep in mind. So get ready for it. Australian businesses and Australians are on the move. I think there is an opportunity here that people aren't seeing. And there's a great example. I was reading an article in the Sydney Morning Herald. There is a professor of surgery, American, married an Aussie girl, came back to Australia. He's now wheeled around on a trolley overnight for the night shift, walking next to the patients in a Seattle hospital or wherever he happens to be. They now don't have people over there doing the night shift. The doctors don't have to come in because this guy based in Australia, and he's more attentive and spending more time with the patients because he's being wheeled around on a trolley. These are all the things that have become an opportunity overnight. So it's around thinking about how we can do these things better. So let's talk about this one. I think this one is a major change for businesses and workplaces. And for any of you managers on the call here, watch out because this one's coming your way. I think in the past, we largely managed our teams the same way. Everyone was on the same contract. We mostly had permanent full-time, occasional couple of part-timers thrown in for good measure. And, most people work 9 till 5, but think back to that research that I shared at the beginning, because I think that is all about to change. So here's what I think could be coming your way. Hopefully not all at once. So this is what we're starting to see, and also what we predicted, a combination of it. Fred can't wait to get back to the office. Mark wants to work from home 4 days a week. Mia is suffering from mental health issues due to stress, COVID, lockdown, and homeschooling. Hallelujah. I know how she feels. Amy is the victim of domestic and family violence and is not performing in her role, but no one knows how to have that difficult conversation with her. Andrew doesn't want to return to the office because he's fearful of COVID, even though you told him it was safe. He's not sure about who in the office is unvaccinated. Karen wants to move to the country and keep her job and keep working from you. David no longer wants to work, wants to be promoted. He's actually enjoyed being at home with the kids, and he doesn't want any more promotions. He's quite happy to sit at the level he is at. Michael's decided he now wants to do his current role part-time in an 8 or 9 day fortnight with no change to salary. And I can probably hear it collectively across the room. You're going, what? All of those things are possible. Hopefully not all at once, because you will be struggling. But I think my question to you is, do you have the knowledge within your team to manage these from an employee relations perspective? Do you have the ability and the skills to have these tricky conversations and negotiate these outcomes for your employees? What would happen if you were to lose 40% of your workforce overnight? What would happen if you were to lose a key employee? And then I think, are you documenting this? And lastly, what happens if some other team members hear that Fred no longer needs to work in the office? He's quite happy to work. We're happy for him to work in Tamworth. And then they go, actually, I've always wanted to live in Noosa. I'm going to have the same conversation. Fred was able to do it. Why can't I too? So I think that's starting to happen. And I think a lot of these scenarios are coming your way. So I think that especially with the Sydney house prices at the moment, they're just ridiculous. So a lot of people are going to go, I'm going to cash out and go and live in a cheaper place to live and still earn my salary. And again, I was talking with Robin in the green room before this. I used to work for Accenture many years ago. And what we did back then was we actually had a different pay scale. If you lived in Brisbane, you weren't less than the people who lived in Sydney, because Sydney was such an expensive place to work. But now we earn the same usually, depending on what location we live in. But not only that, if these guys are cashing out their assets and they've got equity in their houses, then it makes sense to go and move to somewhere where it's a little bit cheaper to live. So I'm just going to pause there and just have a quick drink before I continue. We're going to talk about mental health and domestic violence next. So I want you to think about, and many of you have had long careers, whether you have ever dealt with a team member that has had a mental health issue in the workplace. And I think many of you would say a combination of maybe, but we weren't really sure. They just resigned and went away quietly, a little bit of a few. I didn't have to have that difficult conversation. Or yes, but we didn't manage it well. Or you might have even thought, I suspect that they may have had a mental health issue, but we performance managed them out of the business. So this may shock you, but pre-COVID, 1 in 5 Australians were suffering from a mental health condition. 1 in 5. If you've got 20 in your workplace, you can do the maths. And when we talk about mental health conditions, what we were talking about then was anorexia, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, too much wine, too many recreational drugs, and then your more serious mental health conditions like bipolar or suicide. And I know this because I and a number of my team members are mental health first responders accredited. Luckily, we saw this wave of mental health issues coming, and it's been totally exacerbated by COVID. And what I'm concerned about and predicting is that number is going to push to 20 to 50% of your workforce maybe being impacted by this. And if they're not, their kids or their partner or their mum or their uncle are going to be. And so do your managers have the skills to deal with this? And I would highly recommend that organizations at an absolute minimum have an employee assistance program in place, a counseling service that people can ring up and get some help and advice. And you will never know who rang. It's just part of that support. We are getting calls almost weekly to get those set up for our clients. The other thing is that I would encourage you to have a couple of mental health first responders in place. It is a tough course. It's about 8 hours, and there's a fair bit of prep and an exam you need to take. But that would be good for a couple of people in your organization, depending on the size. What would be super helpful is we work a lot with Graham Cohen from Are You OK? He was one of the founding members. He's on the podcast, so have a listen to his episode. But he's come up with what I think is a great solution, which is called We Care. We Care actually, say I'm worried about Robert. Robert hasn't turned up well to work today. He's looking really miserable. I don't know how to have that conversation. I can do the 20-minute online work with We Care, and then I am facilitated to have a conversation with Robert. I am not expected to be a professional, but I can give him some help and advice and potentially provide that mental health first aid that might get Robert to his GP or might get Robert talking to an EAP program. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is you guys, everyone on this call. I'm worried about all of you, especially if you're a business owner. Excuse me, business owners and entrepreneurs are even at a heightened risk. You are pivoting, you're turning, you're trying to deal with lockdowns. What's the legislation mean? How do I change? And the concern that I've got for you guys is that this isn't going away anytime soon. This is going to be around for the long haul. So I think we really need to get better at this. And so there's that whole saying of put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. And I would encourage you to do that. Lastly, and this is a surprise to many business owners, even though the legislation changed in August 2020, you now have a duty of care to provide a safe place of work for employees that you are concerned are in a domestic violence situation. You have to proactively potentially get involved. And that's very difficult for many, because we used to sometimes go, yeah, we know that's going on, but that's none of my business. Well, now you have a legal obligation, if you believe that something is going on, to provide some help and support. It's 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men. Again, do the maths on your organization. But we effectively moved all of our victims home with their perpetrators, and we've seen some horrendous stats in domestic and family violence. We do have an issue in this country. So if I have triggered anything for you, and I would encourage you all to reach out to Beyond Blue, and Caroline's going to put that in the chat box, the contact numbers there. I wanted to do a quick poll next. Caroline's going to launch our poll for us. I want you to let us know what percentage of your team are fully vaccinated. Do you know what percentage of your team are fully vaccinated? Quickly jump on, and I can have a sip of my tea. That's great. I can see those answers coming through now. I want you to think about, as you're answering, and as many of you getting in there as possible would be fantastic, is, do you have this information on file, is the next question. So if your client asks you, do you have that information? Is it confidential? Is it locked away? Or is it in an Excel spreadsheet that anyone in the business can access it? So if you can end that poll, we've had lots of people vote. Thank you for that. And share the results. We don't know what you voted. I should have said that up front, because I know a lot of people are concerned about sharing some of this information. So what we can see here is 77% of people know, and 23 are not sure what percentage of their team are fully vaccinated. And it's going to cause complex issues, because say, for example, one of my team members is an employee expert, and they're due to go out to the client side. The client might say, we are only allowed vaccinated people on our client side. So do I have that information to hand? Do I have that permission to share that information with a client? And so there's a whole lot of ramifications here. What I'm thrilled about is ELMO are going to be demoing a new solution very shortly, which is excellent. I've had the privilege of looking at that beforehand, and it's going to make managing this so much easier. So let's quickly move on in the interest of time. One of the things that's really challenging for businesses is vaccine management in the workplace. And you'll have now seen that there's been a number of our larger businesses in Australia lead the way. SPC was one of the first, where they said back early in the year, they said no employees cannot be vaccinated, and even clients can't come onto our client site, and any visitors must be vaccinated. But a lot of those bigger clients have deeper pockets than many of us, and they're prepared to take and fight the legal fallout, because we don't have the case law on this. But what I will say is that early case law came about with the flu vaccination, and it was in aged care, and the employee didn't want the flu vaccination and was terminated, and the court found in favor of the employer, because they found that it was reasonable action for the employer to expect and protect all of their aged care residents, that person should be vaccinated. The government has not provided us with a lot of guidance here, other than the Fair Work Ombudsman coming out with a 4-tier system. So if you're in tier 1, where you're required as your duties to interact with people with an increased risk of being infected, then you're pretty safe. But if you're in tier 4, which is probably where I sit, there's not a lot of protection for me. But you all have a duty of care to provide a safe workplace. And this is where the legislation is buffering up against each other. So as an employer, I have a duty of care to provide a safe workplace, but I also have a duty of care to and positively manage that duty of care around discrimination against people who choose within their rights not to get vaccinated, or I'm breaching privacy policies. So that is a bit of an issue. ELMO recently did a survey, and I think 55%, if I remember it correctly, of employees wanted to know that all their fellow employees were vaccinated. That was, that was helping them feel more comfort. New South Wales has obviously just recently hit 80%. A couple of the other states are not far behind. But in Victoria, you've got mandatory vaccinations. That's caused a whole lot of chaos and challenges down there. And guess where it's hurting the most? Small business. If you've got 2 employees, one's vaccinated, one's not, and you can't send your unvaccinated person out to work, what's that going to do to your revenue over the next couple of months? So there are some real issues there. I wanted to share this and I'll read it for you because I think it's relevant, and Caroline's going to pop the article in the chat box. Last week, in a case brought by workers challenging the New South Wales public health orders by the New South Wales Supreme Court, Justice Beach Jones said, "It was the court's function only to determine the legality of orders made under the Public Health Act," in quotes, and his reasons for dismissing the challenge were that so far as the right to bodily integrity is concerned, it is not violated as the orders do not authorize involuntary vaccination of everyone. So we're going to start to see more and more of this case law coming out and the precedents there. Lastly, I just want to quickly run through a very quick case study. We've been doing a lot of work in the allied health space, and I did a bit of work and research with a couple of providers, and my thank you to them, who will remain confidential. But here's what they're experiencing, and I think this will resonate with a lot of you on the call or on the webinar. These were very successful, profitable businesses. Allied Health have massive wait lists. They got more work than they know what to do with. They don't have the employees to do it. So then you factor in this over the top of that. COVID's been really challenging, with massive uncertainty, fear of the unknown, managing a team's diverse reactions, massive disruption in the clinic. You think about it, you'd find out on Sunday or Saturday afternoon. I happened to be out for a long lunch with my girlfriends, and we found out that Saturday afternoon we were going into lockdown and we had to be home by 6 p.m. So the scramble for all of these businesses to redo all of their clients and move to telehealth overnight meant massive rework of appointments. Communications had to be written, and there was chaos and confusion. They moved to telehealth overnight. Now, there has long been a push in the health industry for telehealth. They would have never achieved what they've achieved, and many people will stay with telehealth, and again gives access to people rurally to do that. Team members had extreme reactions. Some were fine, relaxed, some were paranoid, and some had sisters who were newly pregnant, and they were really fearful that they might infect a sister and cause some damage to the unborn baby. And they had clients with massive emotional swings. One of the allied health businesses said they almost had these mums hanging off the door, in tears, floods of tears, not wanting to go back home. They wanted to get out and to the clinic because that was a break from them, from homeschooling and often managing difficult children or children with difficult needs, special needs, and that was really difficult for them. And then the other one was that one shared with me was that they had an organization of 15 and one didn't want to get vaxxed, and it was causing very much a them and us. And there was some huge angst and conflict in the workplace, and they were having to try and navigate that between their employees. So would love you to pop in the chat box if you've experienced any of those scenarios. But what I would like to leave you with as we think about that part of it is, what does that mean? And what I think it means is you're going to have to spend a lot more time and attention on your employees. So I'm going to skip over our employee asset model because I want to get to Robert and Ganesh. So without further ado, I want to welcome Robert and Ganesh to talk about how technology can help us. I'm a massive fan of technology, and I think we can do these things better. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Robert and Ganesh.
Can I just say very briefly, we've got some great questions come in and observations, and I'm just saving them for Natasha and the other panelists to answer at the conclusion of the webinar.
Excellent. Thank you. We will get to those.
Marvellous. Great. Look, thank you, Natasha. It's been fantastic as usual to hear what your perspectives, and I can reiterate a lot of those. We're seeing very similar things. Our New South Wales key account manager has decided to move up to the Gold Coast with his family, exactly as you were talking about your friend, and we are allowing him to keep his job because his territory is New South Wales and Queensland, and he's going to have to put some time into flying down when he needs to meet people. But the reality of it is, most of the time he engages, certainly over the last 18 months, has been via Zoom, and that can continue to happen anywhere, basically on the planet. So, we're seeing it here as well. Some of the other things that you mentioned, the great redundancy or the great resignation. We're hearing a lot about that. We've experienced a little bit of it here at ELMO, not a heck of a lot, but we have experienced it. And I know this is probably a subject for another time, folks, but we have a product called ELMO Experiences that help work a personalized journey for each employee through the career that they want to have, and we're helping customers with that to really minimize the impact of that with that particular product. But today we're talking more about the impact of COVID, and I guess that is an impact of COVID, but to talk more specifically about the vaccination aspects of this, and some of the comments have been talking about this, tracking the vaccination status. How do I do that? How do I stop this being an audit issue for me? How do I make sure that I can address these issues, especially in hotspots, in low vaccination areas? We've all spoken today very much on the assumption that everybody's a knowledge worker. Not all employees are. Construction workers aren't, mining workers aren't, and the issues remain the same. And it's in those more remote areas where the vaccinations have the culture hasn't adapted as much as they have for most of us here in major cities. One of the major things is dealing with the continuing landscape, and not only do we have Commonwealth legislation, but state. Now, right now, as of today, here in New South Wales, where I am, I just uncovered the fact that if you have people back in the office and you get caught with having one of those people or more not fully vaccinated, which by law they have to be back in the office or back at the workplace, the fine can be up to $55,000. That's today. I don't know what it's going to be like tomorrow, because this thing is a really rapidly moving landscape. So how do you track all of that, and how do you also, while you're tracking all of this stuff, deal with the privacy aspects of it and the quality of the data ownership and the quality of the data entry? So if you're asking everybody, okay, well, just prove it to me and I'm going to record it on a spreadsheet, do you do that data entry? Or do you get them to do it? Because if you do it, you're responsible if there's an error. But if there's a self-service aspect to it, then and the employee gets it wrong, then it's on them. So there's those sorts of issues as well that need to be balanced throughout all of this. And then of course, if the government comes a knocking and wants a report, wants to audit you, you need to be able to have reports at your fingertips and really, on-demand reporting. Hello, thank you. Did I just go on mute? I'm off mute. You can hear me? Yep, okay.
Yes, we can all hear you.
Okay, great, thanks. Thank you, guys. All right, so and another aspect of all of this, as many of you were attesting in the comments there, is, okay, so I've got, maybe, well, I'll use my own example, salespeople like myself and the teams that I'm part of who, are already beginning to go back and meet with others and meet with customers, or maybe you've got some people that are professional procurement people and are dealing with suppliers and the people bringing stuff into your buildings and so on and so forth, and therefore dealing with third-party people. So those people are going to be at a higher risk versus some people that may only pop into the office once in a blue moon and will only ever be really dealing with other employees. And so how do you group those people and treat them in different ways? And is that something that you want to even do? And how many different ways do you want to slice and dice it? And where do you draw those lines? We've already spoken about the reporting. So, you need to be able to have a strategy, you need to execute it, and then you need to be able to report on it. And that's really, really important for any company over, I don't know, let's say 50 employees. If it's smaller than that, you could probably get away with doing all of this sort of stuff on a spreadsheet. But for any company that's of any significant size, spreadsheets are really not fit for purpose and really can't be, I would not recommend you want to do this on a spreadsheet. So how does how do you go about doing it? And I'll now take you through how ELMO goes about doing it. All righty. So we have a product called ELMO COVID Secure. Now, we launched this 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's at maximum a month ago, and we, our R&D team just dropped everything and put everything into building this product out. And it's been the most amazing journey to see from vision through to full product in the space of 6 to 8 weeks. It was just extraordinary. But really what it does is it does track the vaccination status, but not just vaccines, but also testing. Again, construction workers at the moment, at least here in New South Wales, are still having to get tested every 3 days. So we can, with our solution, we can track vaccination status as well as testing of to see whether or not people are actually have COVID or not. We have out of the box HR policy templates so that you can take them and be ready to go straight away, and that you can use those to build out your plan about how you're going to roll this out within your organization. So there's flexibility. Obviously, we've allowed for a lot of flexibility depending on your needs as a potential customer. It's all self-service. So the employee portal allows the employee to submit their vaccination status, submit their tests results. It allows for what we're calling conscientious objectors for those people who don't want to get vaccinated. Now, it's up to you how you treat those people, and whether or not you say, well, look, you can't stay in this particular role because you're going to be dealing with a lot of people. We'll need to move you to a more back office role, or however you treat that. But we allow for it in the tool. And obviously it's very configurable, so you can have those different groups, high risk groups, low risk groups, groups in the middle, groups that are based out in regional areas, etc., etc. And it has a built-in alerting and notification process. And of course, as I was mentioning before about the privacy, allows for full access control for confidential data. If we can move to the next slide, please. Cool, thanks. So the benefits. The self-service allows for productivity gains. Obviously, everybody's doing that little piece as opposed to 1 or 2 people having to take all that data and data enter it in. It allows for ownership of data entry, minimizing that data touch points, and obviously the error rates will be significantly lower. And most importantly, the reporting on demand is vital for audit responses, with real-time dashboards, and it also allows for bulk uploads should you need to have that for test results of teams being tested and so on. So I think now I'll stop talking, and I'd like to get Ganesh to give you guys a quick run through of it so you can have a quick look at it, and then we'll go for the Q&A. Ganesh, do you want to take over?
Excellent. Yeah, we'll do that, Robert. Thank you. Natasha, if you can stop sharing your screen.
You've got mouse control now, so you should be good to go.
No, I need to share my screen. So if you can
stop share.
Yep.
There you go.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks for that. Let's just go ahead and share my screen. If you can give me a quick thumbs up if you can see my screen. Yeah, thanks for that, Robert. Excellent. Welcome everyone to the demonstration of the COVID Secure module. So in this demonstration today, we'll talk about how we can use COVID Secure to capture information for your entire workforce, or as Robert mentioned, just targeted areas of the business by location, department, or role. And we'll also see how employees would be able to easily submit their vaccination or test results with evidence as a part of the submission. Now, when it comes to the COVID Secure module, we do provide the clients with several key benefits, which we'll see today. And number one is the COVID Toolkit, which basically gives your clients easy access to ready-to-use policy templates, which can be easily deployed against the whole organization. specific administrators, and this is what Robert was talking about in terms of the security and visibility, specific administrators can also be provided access to a dashboard, which we'll see in a short while, where they can get to see how many people are tested, have tested negative, have tested positive, what's the vaccination status. Everything will be available to them at that point in time. So it's quite real time. We'll start off with the COVID Toolkit, and we'll talk about what that provides for the clients. Now, the COVID Toolkit provides your clients with centralized, ready-to-use COVID forms and external resources as well. So here is where, as an employee, I can go in, have a quick look at the forms, available forms at this point in time. I can assign it to myself, or I can have the administrator assign it to me. But in saying that, I also get access to resources. Now, it's really important to ensure that you get the government-approved resources on vaccine eligibility, where to get tested, and these links can differ across AU and NZ. So for example, over here, I could just go in and have a quick look at the COVID testing link. In case, if you do want other resources to be made available, if the clients want other resources to be made available over here, they can get in touch with ELMO, and we can definitely talk about updating the resources as well. Now, I spoke about the forms. We do provide you with 3 forms that you can see over here: the vaccination form, the negative test result, and the positive test form. The idea behind that is, when it comes to these forms, they can be assigned in bulk by the HR team, or the employees themselves can self-assign these forms. Let's have a quick look at what a form looks like. All right, so this one is a COVID test result negative form. Now, keep in mind that when it comes to forms over here, they support the key requirements for capture of information, including the ability to capture responses, like, for example, what type of COVID-19 test did you receive? As Robert mentioned, it allows for consent to be captured as well. So as an employee, I can go ahead, I can upload the evidence of my latest test result, and I can provide my consent for that information to be used with the HR within my organization, and I can go ahead and submit this. In case, if some of the clients might have the option where they would want their employees to submit the form on a regular basis every 3 days or a week, those settings can be applied within the forms, and the forms, rather than them being controlled by the HR team, once the employee submits the form, the forms would be open for recompletion, let's say every specified time period that you have configured within the same. In saying that, again, going back to what Robert mentioned, sometimes certain departments alone, customer-facing roles, might need to have more forms being submitted or open for a specific set, open more frequently. So you can have assignment rules set up. So in addition to having forms assigned by the HR team, you can have rules within the ELMO software where forms can be assigned based on specific departments or locations or the conditions that the clients might require. The forms also have approvals within them. So if the vaccination forms needs to be cited by key individuals within the business, we can definitely have an approval workflow to manage the sign-off. So once I submit the form, it can go to the HR director, who can then be asked to sign off on the same. And that goes with the notifications as well. The clients would be able to configure notifications which can automatically be sent directly to an HR group. For example, you might have privacy concerns in saying that if I submit, my manager should not see it, it should just go to a select group. You would be able to set up all those form notifications as well. And that's where a security profile comes into the picture. So we have a profile called COVID Secure. So if the clients want specific information like the dashboard or additional information to be viewed, only people with the COVID Secure security profile will be able to view all that information. So that's in terms of the COVID toolkit. I can also be made available the COVID form. So here's where, when an employee is assigned all the forms, here is where they would get to see the forms currently assigned. As you can see over here, I have not started the forms as of yet. But once I do that, based on the statuses can change to submitted, or if I need to submit my test result every 3 days, it would just say required for recompletion as a part of the status. So that's in terms of the forms that can be configured within the COVID Secure module. The other aspect when it comes to COVID Secure is dashboard, where we can provide you with easy visibility over what's happening in terms of the forms being submitted and the vaccination status across the entire organization.
And all right, we're going to have to wrap there, Ganesh, because we've got to get some questions in.
Oh, here you go. That's the dashboard. You can have a quick look at that to see what's the status within your organization in terms of fully vaccinated and the vaccination statuses as well. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ganesh. That's great. I just did want to make sure we left some time for some of the questions to come through. So bear with me. First of all, can I say I've loved the activity on the chat. I can just tell you, I don't think I've ever seen so much interaction on a chat box. So well done, you guys. But I think it's a real, very indicative of how the world's feeling at the moment with all of these different views. So let's move to Q&A, and Caroline, I think I can see some of the questions in the question box. So rather than it is a red hot topic. You're right, Monica.
Yeah, I think we should probably stay away from medical interpretation of vaccines and death rates and things like that. But there's certainly a whole bunch of really good questions that we've got here.
Okay, let me have a look through and see if I can answer these in fairly record time. Most of them are probably going to take a little bit more digging, which we're happy to do offline, but let me give you some high level views. Lee talks about how do we incorporate a mandated COVID vaccination into our businesses and or our employment arrangements. Great question, Lee. And I love that you're from the Northern Territory. And I did love your question when you said that organizations exist because of people, not despite them. I thought that was brilliant. So ideally, you're going to have a vaccination policy in your business, which might cover the flu. And I think what will end up happening with COVID is it will almost morph into it'll be treated almost like a flu jab. But I think that's going to be one of the key policies or amendments that's going to come out of this. And there is a really clear thing from an employment contract. You don't want policies in your employment contract, you want them separated. Julie says, could you provide the link to the legislation re domestic violence? And we will do that. We will also share a link to the mental health first responders. If you've got any questions like this that I don't have the access to that now, can you please send an email to info@Employee Matters and we will make sure that gets to you. One of the great things Caroline has pulled together to send out to everyone after this is a link to a whole lot of the information that we've talked about, and obviously a link to the ELMO guys as well. Andrew asks about obligations as a contractor working within other companies. That's a great question. What they can and can't demand. What are my obligations and demands? Okay, let me try and take this at a higher level because I think that will probably, the answer will fall out of it. I want to preface this by saying everything requires more detail than it used to. So the digging required from our end, because it is so complex at the moment, is a little bit more. But what I would suggest as an independent contractor, you are just that. You're your own business. And many of you will have heard whenever I hear independent contractors, the hairs on my arms stand on edge. It's a really important thing. You will have to, but you may be governed by what their workplace is. So they may say, like SPC has taken the position, all employees, all clients, and all visitors and all independent contractors and even volunteers need to be vaccinated to come onto this work site. So it is going to be, that's this negotiation piece that I was talking about. Temporary health orders, I think we've covered that with that. Well, in New South Wales, that we've had a recent finding on that. Andrew, we'll probably take the rest of that question offline because there's a fair bit in that and I know you well, so happy to do that. And back in the open questions, what happens if the employee doesn't agree to have their data shared with HR and management? Great question, Susan, and lovely to see you here. So one of the things we should have been really upfront about was you have the right to ask your employees, any one of your employees, whether they're vaccinated. They have the right not to tell you. So that's where it gets really tricky, because and then the management of that information is very careful. So it's on a needs to know basis. So if you need to know where you can put your employees, you're going to need to know whether they're vaccinated or not. And if they're not vaccinated, then you're probably going to have to try and put them on alternative duties until such time as they can return to the workplace, which is going to be tricky. I noticed in the chat box there was some questions about an employee of a certain faith that did not want to get vaccinated on those grounds. I would follow that same approach there. Look at alternative duties, look at working from home if that's possible. Is this financially viable for the business to keep doing this? If you're a small business and you can't have that person work from home because they happen to work in a shop, then that's going to have some additional challenges. But if that individual is unable to perform their duties by virtue of a choice or a decision they're making, then you may have to come to some sort of termination arrangement. And in that case, I would strongly suggest you get advice. And Tamara says, Queensland government websites seem to be very wishy-washy with regulations. Any idea where else to look? We'll have a look into that tomorrow and come back to you. I think that is indicative of where we're at. You know, we are literally getting legislation and having to then work out how we're going to apply that to our clients. So I know that there have been some excellent questions there. I'm going to have to close it down now. I'm very conscious, guys, that this session has probably raised more questions than it's given you answers. But if you do want bespoke help, do reach out to either the guys at ELMO or ourselves. We're very happy to help you. And there are details on how you can contact us. So, Robert, have you picked the best question for the winner of a copy of From Hire to Fire and everything in between?
Yeah. So basically, throughout the session today, Karen Ferris has been asking and providing and inputting a lot of really interesting data from the earliest times when we first all logged in, and she was talking about some survey results and things through to to closer to the close now. So I would suggest that Karen gets it.
I agree. I saw Karen put the comment in, the great resignation as a result of the great realization, which I thought was very telling. Karen, can you please send your postal address to info@Employee Matters so we can get a copy of the book out to you? And Caroline, there was so much activity on that. Well, I don't know how you
Ferris was very active. she was tremendously active with lots of insightful questions, and another person who was also active, because that's what I was specifically looking out for, is Lee Eldridge.
Lee, our friend from Northern Territory, where are also mandated vaccines. Thank you to both those guys. Get your address to us and we will get a copy out. So one last thing, everyone, I really truly believe that the secret to building exceptional businesses are your team. There has never been a more critical time to put your team at the forefront of everything that you do. Your team got you to here, and they're going to get you to the next part and out of the pandemic. And it's critical that you keep great team members. They're hard to find. They're even harder to keep. So look after them so that you keep them. And I think from a legislation point of view, there were a lot of very curly questions in there. And some of those I can't answer off the top of my head, require further deliberation. But what I will say is take advice and get that advice documented, and that will help you in your defense if you ever need it. But I would say is be careful, because just because we're in a pandemic doesn't alleviate you from your employer obligations. If anything, they'll be even tougher on you. So Caroline's going to put into the chat box as the last thing. We did a podcast called the Employees Matter podcast to talk about everything COVID, a lot more detail than what we've followed today. So check out that podcast. Other than that, I would like to thank our wonderful friends at ELMO for their support and for joining us on this today. Other than that, here are our contact details. My name's Natasha Hawker, and remember, your employees really matter. Thank you. Stay safe and stay well. And here's to getting out of lockdown, everyone. Take care. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.